5 years ago, my son kicked me out of the house with $50. Now he wants to live in my new villa. I had just returned from the cemetery, my arms still holding a faded bouquet of plastic flowers bought on sale, the faint scent of lavender from the candle clinging to my scarf. I took small, careful steps toward the door I once called mine. I should say our, but it was my son Jacob who opened it, or rather stood in front of it, closing me out. In his hand was a crumpled fistful of small bills and coins. Exactly $50 in crammed, jammed ones and quarters. He flung the coins at my face. Here, go live under a bridge. Buy a hamburger. Get out, old witch. The wind whipped the scarf from around my neck, stirring the lavender scent into the air. His words landed harder than the icy gusts, and I felt the weight of every year since my husband died. Lindsay's voice echoed from the kitchen, shrill and unforgiving. I've told you over and over. Don't burn those funeral scent candles. You stink up the house like a grave. My breath caught at that. I still light one lavender candle every night for him, my dear gentle husband, who was no longer alive to care whether I did or not. From behind Jacob, my little grandson peeked out with wide eyes. He whispered something so quiet I had to strain. Grandma is weird, like a ghost in a horror movie. A stab of fresh heartbreak. I swallowed, clutching the plastic flowers tighter, numb and stunned. This was the facade of my own home, turned into a stage for humiliation. The door clicked shut, a cold, absolute click, the kind that seals off warmth and goodwill. I stood there in the snow, exactly $50 poorer, but 100 times more shattered. I wanted to cry, but I wouldn't, because this wasn't just about being pushed out. It was that my own flesh and blood, my son Jacob, the baby I once held on a storm-tossed night when we had nothing but water gras for supper, now spat at me like I were garbage that stung more than any blow. My fingers curled tighter around the stiff plastic petals. I took my first step away. I did not look back, but the house's silhouette burned itself into my mind. The white frame I co-signed for the walls I scrubbed clean. The dishes I washed as though doing laundry in an icy river. I gave that house away so they could have a fresh start. I thought my son's home would become mine too one day, just not like this. I looked down at the $50 half hidden in coins that clinked and echoed around me, harsh like the laughter that followed me out the door. That money wasn't just currency, it was contempt. It said, you are worthless, you are done here. Snow fell gently at first, then more insistently, as if nature herself could not bear the cold that had settled around me. It covered the bills and coins, and soon blurred the imprint of those cheek bruises from the tossed money. The bouquet wilted in my hands. Brittle plastic stretched thin, symbol of my love and grief, and the price I paid for both. I stepped onto the path that led away from that door, away from that horror I once called home, toward a world wild and cold, but at least mine to wander now. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew I had nowhere left to fall than further. I had lost a home, yes, but it was more than that. I had lost the person I thought my son would be. But during all those years, he was young, and I raised him on porridge and lullabies. I never thought he would lose me so completely. I walked into the night, into the snow's hush, uncertain and broke. But I carried those $10 bills and coins in my pocket like bitter weights of fate. And I carried a stubborn spark inside that perhaps I did not want to vanish. It is strange how hate can grow in a house that was once built on love. It does not arrive all at once like a flood. No. It creeps in drip by drip, like a slow leak you do not notice until the ceiling caves in. That is how it happened to me. Over the course of 3 years under the same roof, I went from being their family to being a ghost. After Harold passed, I sold the little place we had lived in for over 30 years. The money wasn't much. Our house was modest, and the neighborhood had gone downhill, but it was enough to help Jacob and Lindsay buy their larger house in the suburbs. I moved in with them because, honestly, I thought that's what family did. I thought I could help be useful. I thought they wanted me there. At first they pretended, or maybe they even believed it themselves, that I was part of their home. I offered to cook dinner most nights. I had always loved to cook, though these days I preferred simple, healthy meals, fresh vegetables, roasted proteins, herbs instead of salt. Nothing fancy, just clean food that did not hurt the joints or spike the sugar. But after a few weeks, Lindsay started pushing the plates away. Is this quinoa again? She wrinkled her nose. Jacob, your mom cooks like a hospital cafeteria. I miss real food. Real food, I suppose, meant things that came out of a box, or left a grease stain on the plate. Jacob would chuckle, sometimes mutter under his breath, "Yeah, Ma, lighten up, it ain't rehab in here." Then came the comments about my rituals. I still lit a lavender candle every night. That scent reminded me of Harold and our life before everything got so complicated. I never made a fuss about it. Just a tiny flame in my room, a soft prayer, a silent minute, but that too became ammunition. Lindsay walked past one night, saw the candle glowing on my dresser, and muttered, "Creepy, no wonder the kid has nightmares." The next morning, Jacob came into the kitchen and said, "You got to stop with those death candles, Ma. It's weird. You're bringing some bad energy into this house." I smiled and nodded, but something tightened in my chest. Was a minute of memory now too much to ask? I tried to make myself useful in other ways. I did laundry. I vacuumed. I cleaned bathrooms when they were out. I watched my grandson when they needed a date night. I folded towels with care. Ironed Jacob's shirts the way he liked when he was in high school. But the day I accidentally broke one of Lindsay's fancy wine glasses, thin as spiderweb, I saw something shift in Jacob. "Jesus, Ma," he barked. "Can you go 1 week without breaking something? You're worse than a toddler." I apologized, offered to replace it. He waved me off, stormed upstairs. That was the first night no one said goodnight to me. Then came the house papers. Jacob said he had a business opportunity, a friend in construction, a can't-miss flipping deal. He needed to take out a second mortgage on the house, but the bank needed proof of full ownership. He asked if I could sign over my share, the part I'd paid when we first bought the house together. "Just temporary," he said. "On paper only. Nothing's changing." And I believed him. He was my son. I sat at the kitchen table and signed my name where he pointed. He did not even let me read it fully, just smiled and said, "It's all boilerplate, Ma. You trust me, right?" I did. And then slowly things did change. They stopped telling me about family plans. My grandson stopped calling me Grandma and started calling me her. I asked once if he wanted to bake cookies with me, and he said, "My mom says your food tastes like old people." One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find my boxes, my sewing kit, my framed photo of Harold, my winter coats piled by the basement door. Jacob sat at the kitchen island sipping a beer. "We need to talk," he said. I sat. "It's not working anymore, you being here." I opened my mouth, but he raised his hand. "Look, you don't have a legal claim to this place. You signed your share over, remember?" I stared at him, at the boy I had once rocked to sleep through fevers. The man who had cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend left him. "I don't want to fight," he continued. "We've carried you for 3 years, Ma. That's a long time. You got to figure out what comes next." I nodded slowly. Lindsay came down the stairs, her arms folded. "She's not going to get it, Jacob. Just tell her." Jacob took a breath. "You're not welcome here anymore. You have to leave today." They gave me until nightfall. No offer to help, no warmth, just a cold decision they had clearly made long before I arrived home that day. I spent the next hour packing only what I could carry. They did not look at me. I found $50 in my coat pocket, my emergency stash, and kept it clenched in my fist like a life raft. Everything I had done, every diaper changed, every hour of babysitting, every spoonful of soup, every gentle prayer over a fading photograph. None of it mattered now. My presence had become inconvenient, uncomfortable, embarrassing. All those years, I thought I was part of their story. Turns out I was just a chapter they were eager to close. The night before my grandson's FTH birthday party, I stayed up late making his favorite honey apple spice cake. It was the same recipe Harold used to love. I baked two just in case one did not turn out right. My hands shook slightly from the cold and arthritis made the frosting slow work. But every swirl was done with care. In the morning, I tied the cake in a cloth bag nestled with an ice pack and slipped a single lavender candle into my pocket. Not for the cake, not for attention, just something small to light in the corner, away from the noise. A quiet way to remember that Harold never missed one of Jacob's birthdays. I lit it every year. Never once had anyone noticed or cared before. The party was loud, balloons, plastic cups, cartoon music, shouting kids. I walked into the house I no longer lived in, my arms full, the scent of fresh cake following me like a prayer. Lindsay spotted me first. She said nothing, just raised an eyebrow at the bag. I placed the cake carefully on the edge of the dessert table. There were already store-bought cupcakes and a generic sheet cake that said, "Happy birthday, Grayson," in blue frosting. I knew better than to compete. I only wanted him to have a piece of something real made by hands that remembered his first steps. In the corner of the living room near the fireplace, I lit the candle. The scent of lavender barely lifted above the fried chicken and ketchup smells. I sat on the armrest of a chair, watching the chaos. smiling when Grayson ran by in his superhero cape. Then Lindsay noticed it. She walked over, nostrils flaring, her voice sharp. "What the hell is that smell?" I turned surprised. "Just a small candle for Harold." "I always—" She stomped past me, snatched the candle, and blew it out with a theatrical huff. "I told you, do not bring that graveyard stink into my house. This is a birthday party, not a damn seance." People turned, some laughed nervously. I stood, unsure what to say. "I didn't mean—" Jacob appeared behind me, eyes cold. "Enough, Ma." He grabbed my arm, not roughly but firmly enough to move me, and started walking me toward the door. "Jacob," I whispered. Humiliated. "Not now. Please, not here." He kept walking. "Today is about Grayson, and you've made it about you again. We've had enough." The front door opened, and the cold hit my face like a slap. Laughter bubbled from inside. A phone camera was raised. I saw a flash. Jacob's voice followed behind me, loud enough for the guests to hear. "This is the day we set the house free. No more guilt, no more drama. Goodbye, Mother." The door shut behind me. I stood outside. My coat too thin for the season, the cake still inside, my grandson still inside. The lavender candle extinguished, left behind on the mantel like a discarded relic. I could hear the party continue without me. Music, laughter, wrapping paper tearing, a woman's voice giggling. Well, that was awkward. And someone else responding. She's always been kind of off. I walked down the icy steps, holding the cloth bag that now felt empty. The snow had begun to fall, delicate flakes landing on my gray curls. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because it felt like even my tears had been taken from me. I had no more left to shed. They had erased me, not just from their home, from their lives, from their memories, from the family portrait I once helped paint, stroke by stroke, with quiet hands and humble love. That night, I sat in the back corner of a public bus station, the only warm place I could find. The candle was still in my pocket, its wick slightly bent. I turned it over in my hand, feeling the wax smooth and cool. In my lap sat the leftover cake I had managed to carry with me. I took one bite. Sweet, soft, spiced with cinnamon and sorrow. It tasted like grief. But I ate the slice anyway because I had made it. Because it was mine. And because someday, somehow, I knew this would not be the last birthday candle I lit. The bus station closed at midnight. I had nowhere to go. After that, I walked. The wind had picked up, sharp as glass, against my cheeks. Snow flurried down in icy curtains, painting the sidewalks bone white. I pulled my coat tighter, the zipper broken, and kept my eyes low. I was too cold to think, too humiliated to cry, too tired to hope. My hands were stuffed into the lining of my coat, holding the last thing I had not surrendered. The candle. My last lavender candle. The one I lit every year for Harold. The one Lindsay snuffed out and tossed aside like it meant nothing. I had no home now. No family, but I had that candle. I clutched it like a compass. It smelled like love, like the old house before it filled with judgment, like nights when Harold read aloud and Jacob fell asleep in his arms. I was trying to hold on to a life that no longer existed. It must have been around 1 a.m. when I passed the old freight terminal on 3rd Street, a place long forgotten, windows broken, graffiti on the bricks. It looked abandoned, but it blocked the wind, so I stepped behind it for a minute's relief. And that was when I heard it. At first I thought it was a cat, a thin sound, high-pitched and shivering. But then it came again. A wail, raw and aching, not feeling at all. I froze. The sound was coming from the dumpsters. I hesitated, looked around. No one, only the swirling snow and the distant echo of a siren somewhere downtown. The crying came again. I moved slowly, numb fingers trembling as I lifted the broken lid of the first bin. Nothing. The next one, still nothing. But the third, my heart stopped. Inside, lying atop a plastic bag half covered in frost, was a newborn baby girl. No older than a few hours, her skin was turning blue at the edges, her tiny fists clenched, her mouth barely strong enough to cry. She was naked except for a damp hospital receiving blanket. She had been left here to die. I gasped, not from the cold, but from the horror. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I pulled off my scarf, wrapped her in it, tucked her close to my chest. Her skin felt like ice against mine. I whispered, It's okay, baby. It's okay. Grandma's got you. She didn't open her eyes. I needed warmth. I had no phone, no car, no heat source, only the candle. I always carried matches in a little pocket inside my left glove, an old habit from my camping days with Harold. He used to say, "Never trust a fire to show up unless you bring it yourself." I fumbled it out, shielding it with my hands, and lit it with the matches I kept inside my glove, a habit Harold had taught me during our camping days. The little flame sputtered, flickered in the wind, then held. I crouched, curled around her tiny body, cupping her hands over mine near the flame. It was not much, but it was enough. The scent of lavender rose around us, soft and surreal, a lifeline. I started singing a lullaby, the one I used to hum to Jacob when he was a baby. "Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee." She stirred just barely. I looked down. Her fingers twitched, her lips moved. I screamed for help loud, desperate. My voice cracked to the silence of the night. And then, thank God, a passing sanitation worker heard me. He called 911. The ambulance arrived 6 minutes later. It felt like 60. They took her from my arms and placed her in a warm incubator box. I could hardly breathe. "She's still alive," one paramedic said, astonished. "It's a miracle. She would have frozen in another 20 minutes. The other added, "How'd you even find her?" I did not answer. I just showed them the candle. The hospital said she was severely hypothermic, but stable. No one knew who her parents were. The tags had been cut off her blanket. The nurses called her Baby Angel, but I knew her name the moment I saw her open those eyes in the NICU, glassy and blinking as if looking for something she had not yet found. I named her Hope. That morning, the story exploded. A janitor had taken a photo of me huddled in the snow, candle glowing beside a tiny bundle wrapped in scarves. It went viral. Grandma Guardian Angel saves abandoned infant with candle in blizzard. I was on the news, local papers, radio, even a segment on the national morning shows. People cried, people donated, people wrote letters. They asked me what made me stop that night. I told them because I know what it feels like to be thrown away, and no one deserves that. For once, the silence I'd lived in was broken. The world finally saw me, not as a burden, not as a ghost, but as someone worth remembering and hope. She clung to life like a fighter, and soon she would become mine. 2 days after the story aired on the local news, a man appeared at the hospital with a bouquet of yellow tulips and a look in his eyes like he had been searching for something a long time. He was tall, his back curved slightly from age, but his presence filled the small waiting room like sunlight through frosted glass. He wore a tweed coat with leather buttons and carried a folded newspaper in one hand, the article about me and the baby, with my name printed right beneath the headline. "Excuse me," he said to the nurse. "Is Adel Hartman still here?" I was in the corner knitting a small pair of socks for Hope, who was still under care but recovering beautifully. The nurse pointed in my direction. The man turned to me, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he smiled, and I remembered those eyes. Younger then, filled with pain and fever. Back in a tent hospital in Dang, 1972. I whispered, "Walter?" He nodded, voice thick with emotion. "You remember?" I set the yarn down, my hands trembling. "They nearly told me you died." "I nearly did," he said, sitting beside me. "But you wouldn't let me. You stitched me back together when I was more gone than here. You sang Amazing Grace while I faded in and out, and when I came to, you were still holding my hand." "I did that," I whispered, eyes welling. "You saved me," he said, "and I never got to thank you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph, a faded black and white shot of us. I was young in uniform, my hand resting on the shoulder of a bandaged, barely conscious man. "I've carried this for over 50 years, he said, "and now I see your face again, this time saving another life." It was like a sign. We talked for hours. Walter had made his fortune in timber and real estate, but never remarried after losing his wife 10 years ago. No one ever quite matched her silence, he said. She, like you, didn't speak often, but when she did, the whole world listened. He asked to meet Hope the next day. She was in the nursery when he first saw her, small, sleepy, blinking at the ceiling lights. With the same fierce determination I had seen in the snow, Walter stood beside the glass and said softly, "That little girl survived because someone refused to turn away. That's a rare kind of strength." That afternoon, Walter drove me to a clearing just beyond the northern woods outside Anchorage, a stretch of land bordered by pine with a view of the mountains that felt like breathing peace. He stopped the car, stepped out, and handed me a brass key. I built this place years ago for retirement, he said. But after my wife passed, I couldn't bring myself to live here alone. Now I know why. It wasn't meant for me, it was meant for you. I stared at him. I can't accept this. You can, he said gently. And you should. You gave me back my life once. Let me give you something back for you, for hope. The cabin was a masterpiece. Wood-carved archways, a stone fireplace, soft leather chairs, and a porch that looked out over miles of forest and sky. It smelled like cedar and possibility. I moved in the following week after the court finalized the guardianship. Hope was mine. Legally, officially, fully, the social worker said there had never been a case like ours. A child saved by a stranger, bonded not by blood, but by warmth. The judge looked at me, then at Hope, and said, "Sometimes the law only catches up to what love already knows." She had no birth certificate name, so I gave her one. Hope Lavender Hartman. Hope for the life she would live. Lavender for the candle that saved her. Hartman because she would never again be without a family. At night, we lit candles together. Not just lavender, but eucalyptus, vanilla, and even cinnamon during Christmas. But always one lavender, always first. I would light the match, and Hope would whisper for Grandpa Harold. And then we would pray, not for miracles, just for time, for grace, for warmth. She grew fast, stronger than anyone expected. At 5, she had a wild head of curls and a way of tilting her head that reminded me of myself at her age. Stubborn, curious, quiet, until I had something worth saying. Walter became a part of our lives, visiting every Sunday with groceries he insisted on buying, and stories of the old days. He and I would sit on the porch while Hope played with her dolls nearby. He never remarried, and neither did I, but we became something more than companions. We were two lives once broken, now mended by kindness. His, mine, and that of a child who should never have had to fight so early to serve. We never spoke of what we were. We didn't have to. He held my hand during doctor visits. I stitched buttons back on his flannel shirts. We celebrated Christmas with hot cocoa and 3 stockings by the fire. And each year on the night of the blizzard, we lit a single candle and told the story again. The story of how a baby cried in the snow and someone answered. Not for praise, not for glory, but because that is what love does. 5 winters came and went, quiet and full of meaning. Hope grew taller, braver. Walter's hair thinned more. Mine turned snow-white, not from age alone, but peace. In that cabin surrounded by trees, I had no need to explain myself, no need to tiptoe or apologize for breathing. For once in my life, I simply was. Then one morning in late autumn, the peace shattered. Walter had gone to the market. Hope was in the kitchen drawing sunflowers with her tiny fingers smudged in orange and yellow crayon. I was sweeping the porch when I heard tires crunch gravel, unfamiliar, slow, hesitant. A black SUV pulled into the clearing, the windows tinted, the license plate familiar. My heart didn't race. It slowed. The door opened. Jacob stepped out, leaner than I remembered. His beard patchy, clothes wrinkled, the scent of desperation clinging to him like wet ash. Lindsay emerged next, thinner too, but her voice sharp as ever. "Is this it? This cabin?" Then I saw the boy. My grandson, now 10, maybe 11, sat in the back seat, eyes glued to a cracked tablet, not even looking up. Jacob looked at me like he had just swallowed a bitter pill. "You're really out here," he said, "living like royalty while we've been." He cut himself off, shaking his head. "Can we come in?" I stayed silent. The broom in my hand didn't move. Behind me, the door creaked open and Hope stepped out. "Mama, who are they?" Her voice was curious, but her hand slid into mine. Jacob's eyes flicked to her. "You adopted a kid?" Lindsay scoffed. "Of course she did, playing saint for the cameras. We lost the house," Jacob said suddenly. "The market crashed. The company folded. Our boy got expelled. Some nonsense about aggression. We've been couch surfing for months." He glanced at Walter's truck in the driveway. "And I see you found company." The implication in his tone curdled my stomach. "Is that your boyfriend?" Lindsay sneered. "Or your sugar daddy?" I flinched, but not from shame. From the memory of the woman I used to be, the one they could silence. Hope stepped closer to me. "Mama, why are they talking like that? Why are they so mean?" Jacob ignored her. His voice rose. "So that's it. Dad dies and you shack up with the first old man who waves $1. Is this the example you set for a child? You couldn't even wait until his ashes cooled. Lindsay added, "You're a disgrace." A parasite. We should have known when you lit those creepy candles every night, whispering to ghosts. Maybe you were praying for this, huh? To trade up to leave us for this? Each word bounced off the porch like thrown stones, but none pierced deeper than the look Hope gave me. Not scared, just confused, protective. Her tiny fingers tightened around mine. I met Jacob's gaze and said nothing because there was nothing new to say. He had made his choices. So had I. Walter's truck pulled in just then. He stepped out, groceries in hand, his warm eyes scanning the scene quickly. He walked up beside me and placed his hand gently on Hope's shoulder. Jacob snorted. "Wow, this is rich. You traded your family for a rich man and an orphan. You replaced us." That was the moment that word replaced. It hit not because it was true, but because of the assumption behind it, that I should have stayed miserable, that I owed them loyalty no matter how they treated me. I finally spoke. "No," I said calmly. "I did not replace you. You threw me away like trash on your son's birthday in front of strangers, for lighting a candle, for being quiet, for still loving the man who raised you while you mocked him behind his back." Jacob flinched, but I wasn't done. "You think your father didn't hear you call him a burden? You think he didn't see you roll your eyes when he couldn't get up from the couch? He died believing he was in the way. You did that, not me." Lindsay's face twisted. "This place, this life, you don't deserve any of it. You're just an old woman with luck." Hope stepped forward, chin high. "My mom saved me in the snow. I was in the garbage. She gave me warmth. She does deserve it." Her voice, so small, rang louder than any of theirs. Walter put the groceries down, looked at Jacob and said, "You raised your voice at the wrong woman, son. This home, it's hers. Bought with the kind of love money can't buy, and your kind, you don't belong here." Silence fell heavy. Jacob looked at me again, but it was a different look now. Part shame, part panic. "I just thought maybe we could stay a while." I didn't answer. I walked inside, closed the door behind me, lit a lavender candle, and held Hope's hand. They came back the next morning. Jacob's knock wasn't loud this time. It was deliberate, controlled. I stood on the other side of the door, waiting, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be calm. When I opened it, both Jacob and Lindsay stood straighter than yesterday. Less rage, more calculation. Lindsay held a folder in her hand. "We're not here to fight," she said. "We just want to talk." We were wrong. "Okay. Everyone makes mistakes." Hope stood behind me, watching quietly. Walter leaned against the porch rail, arms crossed. Jacob's voice dropped. "Just a week, Mom. We have nowhere else. Just let us stay until we figure things out." I stepped aside, but only long enough to pick up something from the hallway table. A small wooden box. I walked past them and sat it gently on the porch table. Then I opened the lid. Inside was a candle. Lavender. The same scent they mocked for years. Beside it, a USB drive. They stared at it. "What is that?" Jacob asked. I picked up the drive, turned it over in my hand. "Something I never meant to use," I said. "Until you came here talking about betrayal." Lindsay scoffed. "Seriously? You're playing videos now?" I nodded toward Walter. "He helped me recover it from the old house, the security system I installed after your father fell twice. The one you never knew recorded sound." Jacob's jaw twitched. "You're bluffing." "No," I said. "I kept the worst one, just one." I walked back inside and returned with my laptop. Clicked. The screen came alive. It was grainy footage, but clear enough. The living room. My late husband Harold on the recliner, thin and coughing. Jacob standing over him, arms crossed. "You just sit there all day, don't you? You're not even trying. Why don't you just, I don't know, go to a nursing home or something? You're dragging Mom down with you." Harold didn't answer in the clip. He just looked away. Jacob again, louder this time. "You're not a father anymore. You're a burden. You're sucking the life out of this house." The clip stopped. Silence replaced it. Jacob's face had gone pale. Lindsay stammered, "That's out of context." "No," I said softly. "That's the context you gave us. Your father cried that night, told me he felt invisible. You did that, Jacob. You called him worthless before the cancer took him. And when I lit candles to remember him, you said I was crazy." Hope stood at my side, small and fierce. She said, "Mama, is that the man you loved?" I nodded. She stepped in front of me and looked up at Jacob. "You hurt her and him. You don't deserve this house." Walter hadn't moved, but he stepped forward now, placing his hand on my shoulder. Quiet, steady. He did not need to speak. Jacob took a step forward. You don't get to judge me. You think you're some hero now because of a kid in a cabin? You were nothing until that baby showed up. I looked at the broken man in front of me. The boy I once bathed in a tin tub. The one I sat beside during storms. The boy who grew into a man I no longer recognized. You talk about betrayal, I said. But how can you betray something you never honored to begin with? He didn't answer. Lindsay snapped. This is insane. You're choosing a candle and a memory over your real family. I picked up the lavender candle, held it between both hands. You never understood. It was never about the candle. It was about respect. Jacob slapped the laptop shut. Then in a burst of anger, he swiped the candle from my hands and hurled it onto the porch. It shattered. Glass and wax everywhere. Hope flinched. Walter stepped in finally. That's enough, he said. You're done here, Jacob glared. This isn't over. Yes, I said calmly. It is. He stormed off the porch. Lindsay followed, muttering under her breath about lawsuits and karma, and how we'll see who ends up alone. They left in silence, picking up dust as they disappeared into the trees. I bent down to pick up the broken candle pieces. Hope helped, gathering the wax into her tiny palms. She whispered, We can light a new one, Mama. I smiled. We already have. The sound of their tires crunching over the gravel faded until the forest reclaimed the silence. I stood still for a moment, not angry, not triumphant, just resolved. I closed the door gently, not with rage, not with vengeance, but with finality. Then I turned the lock. A simple click, not loud, but firm. Hope looked up at me, her little hands still dusted with broken candle wax. Mama, she asked, do we still light the lavender tonight? I smiled, smoothing her hair back. Of course, my love. We light it for the people we carry in our hearts, not the ones we had to leave behind. She beamed. I took the new candle from the drawer. Lavender, always lavender. That night, we sat at the table as the warm scent curled into the air, wrapping around us like a lullaby. Walter joined us, pouring 3 small mugs of tea. Hope insisted on making a toast with her juice box held high to family that sees you, she said, and loves you anyway. I clink-dicked my cup to hers to quiet strength, Walter added, to beginnings disguised as endings. The candle flickered gently as we sipped. Outside, the snow began to fall again. Soft, slow, undisturbed. That week, a journalist returned to do a follow-up story. The headline read, From Forgotten to Fierce, the grandma who lit a candle in the cold. They wrote about my years in silence, my banishment, the baby girl in the dumpster, the man I once saved during wartime who gave me the gift of a second life, and the little girl who saved me in return simply by needing someone. They called me a symbol, a survivor, a force they hadn't seen coming. But I did not feel extraordinary, just determined, like a root that keeps growing even in frozen soil. But I do not feel like something risen from ashes. I feel like someone who stopped apologizing for surviving. Hope and I continued our life in the villa. Walter built her a little treehouse near the pines. She called it the Lavender Lookout. Every morning she left drawings of her dreams taped to the windows as if giving them wings, and I began to write again. Letters, memories, lessons I had once swallowed out of fear of being too much. I submitted a column to a local paper called Wisdom from the Porch. It was picked up statewide within 6 months. Soon after, I was invited to speak at a conference for women over 60 who were starting over. And when they asked me the title of my talk, I told them, You are not a burden, you are the roots. The day I stood on that stage, I wore a pin that Hope had made from dried lavender stems. As I looked out at the crowd of silver-haired warriors, I said, I once thought silence made me noble, but it only made me invisible. Now I speak, not loudly but clearly. I heard from thousands of women afterward, women who had been erased in their own families. Women who had been told they were crazy for lighting candles. Women who were called difficult for daring to mourn the people they loved in peace. And I told every single one of them, you do not need permission to remember or to begin again. One spring evening, as Hope and I walked the trail behind our home, she looked up and said, Mama, do you think the people who hurt us ever feel sorry? I thought about Jacob, about Lindsay. I had not heard from them since that final day. I imagined them wandering, still blaming the world, still unable to see the root of their own collapse. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I know it's not ours to carry anymore. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. When we returned to the house, The re was a package on the porch. No return address. Inside was a single note typed unsigned. We saw you on TV. We were wrong. There was no doubt in my heart who it was from. Regret has a certain stench. The same scent of desperation I once saw on their faces. But now it arrived in silence, in shame. There was no name, no apology, just the weight of regret wrapped in cowardice. I burned the note in the fireplace and whispered a prayer, not for them, but for anyone still living in shame that does not belong to them. On the 5th anniversary of Finding Hope, we hosted a gathering at the villa. We invited neighbors, old friends, even the fire chief who had responded to my call that night. There was lavender cake, candles lining the porch, and music that Harold once loved. Hope ran up to me halfway through the evening and pulled on my sleeve. "Mama," she said, "can I tell everyone why we light the candles?" I bent down, looked her in the eyes. "Of course you can, my heart." She stood on the porch steps and cleared her throat. "We light them," she said, "because some people don't want to see the light. They say it smells weird or makes them sad. But Mama says when something smells like love, you keep it lit no matter what." The crowd clapped, some cried. Walter placed his arm around my shoulder. As the sun dipped low and the candles danced in the breeze, I looked out over the woods, the sky, the future, and I thought, this is what legacy really is. Not the money, not the house, not even the story on the news. It is the scent your life leaves behind when no one's watching. And mine? Mine smells like lavender and strength and second chances. I do not just survive. I bloom every night with every flame. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been called too quiet, too emotional, too much, or not enough, remember this. Your voice matters, even if they tried to silence it. And if someone ever made you feel like you didn't belong, light your own candle, take up your own space, and never apologize for the light you carry.